Get your stinking rat out. It's late night large.
Welcome to the show, Fed on Famine, Late Night Large. Tap dancing on the head of a pin is me, Aaron Bliss, while wearing a gimp mask while he steals your intellectual property is Mike Large.
That's me.
How are we doing this week, Mike?
Yeah, not bad. Not three bad. Had a bit of rain, didn't we? But I think we're due another heat wave, aren't we? Is it next week? Is it for a couple of weeks, something like that? So
Hopefully not for that long, but well,
yeah, I think it is.
Well, hopefully not for that long, but it's a shame it didn't coincide with my festival. Really, I could have done with a drier weather during this particular weekend, but well, you know what they say, the weather never fits your plans, does it? Speaking of weather, obviously this week we've had the apocalyptic report from is it the ISPCC or something on just how bad climate change will be and how close we are to absolute catastrophe. But that's for another late night large, perhaps. As you might know, on Lockdown Large, me and Mike, we go through the COVID issues of the week, things related to the pandemic and the government's handling of it, which obviously ties into our own lives, how it affects us, etc., etc. So we'll try and stay focused on that. The developments this last week or so. Now, first of all, Mike, you won't be surprised to hear we're getting groundhog fever at the moment from the same mistakes and the same piss takes happening over and over again. So old BJ, he visited Scotland. We're getting used to the fact that Boris Johnson doesn't kind of really, I mean, he's kind of like an overgrown school child, and he just doesn't pay attention to any rules or conventions at all. So he went up to Scotland to visit, I think, a wind farm production electricity generation plant or something. So he went up there so he could cosplay, you know, with his fluorescent jacket and hard hat, like where he pretends that he's actually done his proper day's work. He does love those photo opportunities. So he went up there, but the interesting thing for me, Mike, is he refused to meet the First Minister, which is, you know, the average Joe who might be listening to this show might think, so what? Well, that's kind of a diplomatic no-no to visit Scotland and not like at least have a hey, how you doing, shake hands, quick chat with the First Minister who actually leads Scotland. So that was a bit disrespectful, but you know, we are talking about Boris Johnson here. He went to this wind farm place, and of course Boris Johnson used to write articles taking the piss out of wind generation, wind turbines. You know, went back when he was pretending to be Jeremy Clarkson, just saying like, oh, everything that I don't agree with is hippy dippy shit, and it's all really silly. He said something about wind turbine couldn't blow the skin off a rice pudding or something, and now he believes in it because he realizes that actually scientists know a lot more than he does, and it would look
Does
really,
he?
Probably not, but he's pretending.
Does he realise that?
Well, judging by his pandemic handling, probably not, no. But it is in his benefit because Glasgow is hosting, you know, COP26, which is shaping up rather to be possibly the most important meeting in, it's not really an exaggeration to say, in mankind's history, one of them, coming up, because the decisions that will be made there will basically seal our fate, whether we are going to have unpleasant changes from climate change or whether we're going to have absolutely abominable catastrophic changes, including things like the collapse of the Atlantic Gulf Stream, I think, sea levels rising an incomprehensible amount, massive droughts and famines, completely uninhabitable sections of the globe for human beings. So yeah, all fun and games. So COP26 is going to be a chance for the richest nations to decide, are they going to actually lay down some real action that may keep us within the 1.5-degree global warming, which we could have avoided had we started a decade ago, when it would have been a lot better to begin this, or whether we're going to have to drastically change our lifestyles to even have 1.5 degrees, which is still going to cause horrible changes for some people on the planet and make things more.
Just started raining quite heavily, actually. While you talk about that.
Yeah,
Here.
yeah. Looks like it's going to out here as well. So yeah, I mean that's going to be one of the things. I think one of the major things for this country, particularly, is part of London will be underwater, won't it?
Well, I mean, you say that, but obviously, climate change doesn't exist.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think it'll be fine, won't it?
Anyway, so COP26, Boris Johnson pretending to care about climate change.
Hang on.
Has to.
I think just before this fucking video gets taken down,
removed. Yeah.
That was a joke.
Yeah, just to make it clear, Mike is being satirical. He's parodying a climate change denial position. Please don't remove this and say we're engaged in climate denial. Although obviously you'll have all kinds of climate denial videos everywhere else on YouTube, so I don't see how we have more influence than them. But yeah, please don't feel like we are being we're not being facetious there, because we clearly are. So yeah, he was prattling around in his hard hat and his fluorescent jacket, pretending to be one of the proles. And he was with a person who apparently he was in close contact with and stood next to for long periods during this trip to pretend to be into environmentalism. And they later tested positive for COVID. And he's decided again, he's just not going to isolate. And Mike, what do you think of this? Because I don't know what to make of it, because like I've got two schools of thought. So number one is this is just Boris Johnson's like childish, like, oh, I don't get told what to do, I'm more important than that, and he just gets sick of like obeying rules. But the other thing that occurred to me is he's really fucking lazy. So why would he not take another 10 days isolation where he could piss off the Checkers and just wallow like a beach whale while carry weights on him hand and foot, or whoever his butlers are or whatever? I don't know. What do you make?
I think it is a difficult one, isn't it? Because I was going to say something similar with regards to the fact that you often make reference to his apparent laziness, in which case, like, the decision not to isolate, like you say, kind of conflicts with that, doesn't it, a little bit? You think, well, hang on, you've been given don't fucking worry about anything for 10 days. To be fair, that wouldn't be like that. He'd just have to work from home, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
But
well, not even work from home though, wouldn't it? I mean, if he pisses off the Checkers, which he shouldn't do because you're not really supposed to travel, but if he pisses off the Checkers, that's like luxury mansion in the country.
Fucking hell, monsoon out there. Yeah, no, he I don't know what his kind of thought process. To be honest, he would just have to do everything he has to do anyway from home, and I think he probably just doesn't want to have to. He can't be at home, right? Confined in that space, and let's just assume it would be at home, and you say piss off the Checkers, whatever, but he can't be confined at home, because how else is he going to be sniffing out his next mistress? Do you see what I mean?
It's a good point. Yeah.
You can't be stuck at home in the old bread knife, can you? You've got to be out there having a sniff about, see what's going on.
You think he's going
Can't
to
do
be?
that if he's isolating.
Yeah, he's trying to be horn dog again.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think you're right. Look, I mean, he's we ripped into him last week, didn't we? Because of him knocking up Carrie again, when he apparently can't finance his current lifestyle. So maybe he is. Maybe he's looking to hook up with someone else, drop the kids on Carrie. For anyone else, I would like say, yeah, I'm definitely joking there, because that's almost a libelous comment to say that someone would give so little a shit about their children that they'd literally slag off their wife, hook up with some other tart, and just get on with it and try and avoid the child maintenance. But this is Boris Johnson we're talking about. He's literally made a career and a life out of doing that. We know he's done it. It's like literally in the public record. So you know what you say there might not be too far from the truth. We don't know. But did you see?
Yeah.
So sticking with Boris Johnson, and obviously this does still relate to his handling of the pandemic, because it all ties together with what he's been wasting his time doing instead of getting a grip. Did you see a story in the news this week? I mean, not that it came as too much of a surprise. In fact, it was going through my head for a while, that he's been slightly at loggerheads with the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak. Did you see this?
Been a bit of squabbling.
Yeah, that basically. I mean, Rishi. By the way, I know a lot of people like Rishi Sunak. I'm not really sure why, other than he gets favourable media coverage. I know there's this idea that, oh well, he paid people's furlough, and it's like, yeah, but pretty much any chancellor would have had to do that. It doesn't make him special, but anyway,
Is he popular?
he's not apparent. Well, you don't know whether he's popular at large. He's the most popular Tory apparently with Tory members. He's
With Tory members.
Yeah. Well, they're going to choose the next prime minister, aren't they? So yeah, that's why I say that. But Rishi Sunak, I mean, let's not forget, he did a lot to actually make the pandemic worse, particularly help out to eat out to help out, which is one of the worst decisions that this government made during the pandemic. That's apparently forgotten because he's got a winning smile, and I don't know, he's very smooth. Good to see a short ass getting some good publicity, because I believe he's about 5'2", so bigger for the short man. Yeah, so he seems to be very popular, particularly with the Tory. So anyway, Mike, the point I'm trying to make is, I always thought that when Johnson's popularity came crashing down, which it inevitably would, because he doesn't give a shit about anyone but himself, and eventually those people always get found out. And now he's starting to get found out. His popularity is as low as it's ever been, apparently, which was, I think, back in January, he was quite low because of, the fact that everyone was locked in their houses. He'd made a massive mess of the pandemic, but he recovered. But now he's right back down at unpopularity, despite most of the population being vaccinated now. It might be the mess with travel, these kind of things. We don't know exactly what's causing it, considering he's been fucking useless the whole way through this pandemic. So we can't nail down exactly what everyone is suddenly thinking. No, I don't like him anymore. Are people seeing, the fact that we're now having empty shelves in supermarkets because we're apparently 100,000 HGV drivers short, and now he's thinking of drafting in the army to take food to supermarkets. 2,000 drivers, by the way. Just work out the maths between that. 100,000 drivers short. He's thinking of putting 2,000 specialist HGV drivers from the military to cover that shortfall. Not going to work, is it? And you can tell that the government's still desperately trying to say that, oh, that's COVID, despite the fact nowhere else in the EU has empty shelves. But there you go. Anyway, so he's making a mess of everything. And in my head, I'm always thinking, like, when he inevitably crash and burns, who's going to replace him? Now, we've discussed this before, haven't we? That Rupert Murdoch's choice is Michael Gove. He obviously wants... But Michael Gove is incredibly unpopular amongst the public. I can't think of anyone who really likes him, even Tory members. So Michael Gove is a weird one, because Murdoch obviously wants him. He's Murdoch's sock puppet, but none of the public like him. So that's really risky. But then who else is like remotely competent and is like has a good sort of popularity level with the public. Now this is why everyone's going Rishi Sunak. Now, leaving aside the fact that I think that the Tory base and particularly Tory voters, I don't think they'd really stomach an Asian man to be prime minister, but you know, maybe I'm wrong. But the fact that he's getting so popular, remember when Johnson made him the Chancellor in the first place was because Sajid Javid wouldn't do everything that Dominic Cummings told him. So literally Rishi Sunak was put in place to basically be a gopher to do whatever Johnson wanted. And then obviously we had all the thing about Cummings driven out of government. And then I thought, well, this is going to be interesting now because Johnson wants to have a competent Chancellor, because if you don't have a competent Chancellor, you're going to be finished. So you have to have someone who's at least competent. But he can't be too competent because then the public like him more than Johnson, and then there's a chance that he replaces Johnson. So you've got this funny dynamic where you can argue this is why Johnson has so many incompetent ministers in other positions, because he doesn't want anyone to outshine him. Because as long as no one outshines him, he can still remain the prime minister. But Rishi Sunak's a funny one, isn't he? Because he leaked this letter to, I don't know if it's the Tory Graph or the Times, where he basically it was an open letter to the Prime Minister. I think he also sent it to the Prime Minister to say he doesn't agree with the current travel restrictions and things should be eased up more and things were confusing, whatever. Basically playing to the Tory base. And Johnson apparently was furious when he saw it. And yeah, anyway, the word is on the grapevine, there's a rumour, or a groomer rather, that Johnson suggested that he should demote Rishi Sunak to Health Secretary. Now, apparently he was then advised by another advisor that if you do that, it's basically signing your death warrant. Like that will be the end of you as Prime Minister. Now, I don't think that's particularly true, but there's definitely some truth in it. It would be a very, very silly decision. I don't know. What do you make of it, Mike? What do you make of the whole situation? How do you see this?
I think it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because you have to. What stance do you take? You know, can he be seen to kind of lose a fight with one of his ministers that make him look weak? Mm-hmm. Not only did he not have their support, but he also was bettered by them. But then, if he does take action against this particular minister, yeah, is he signing his own P45? So, it's a tough one.
Yeah.
What would you do if you were Bojo? Ooh. What would you do?
Well, this is assuming I've fucked up as badly as Bojo.
Yeah.
What would I do? It's really tricky, isn't it? Because there's no easy answer. Because you can't have the Exchequer being like an incompetent department, but at the same time, this guy is looking every day more like your replacement. They do say keep your friends close and your enemies closer, particularly in politics, don't they? So I think what I would probably do, to me, the most obvious thing to do, and I know it's dirty tricks and whatever, I would get my people to start briefing against him, dropping little tidbits to the newspapers, you know, little stories about him that don't paint him in a particularly good light. And then if he comes to me and says, what the hell is all this? I know it's your people doing this. You just go, yeah, just trying to keep you on the toes, mate. Just you know, just cool off on thinking you got my job in the bag. And maybe we'll ease off on the briefings. I think that's the way it's normally done, isn't it?
Well, obviously we don't know that. But I don't know. I think it's a tough one, isn't it?
I feel like it's the only way. I feel like that's the only way that Johnson could do it without the public turning on him. Do you know what I mean? I know members of his party will turn on him, but if he sacks his Chancellor, that's going to look really bad to a certain section of the electorate.
Well,
If he,
this is the problem as well. Like, yeah, I don't know. It's tough, isn't it? Who does he most need right now?
who does he most what?
Who does he most need right now? The support of his party or the support of the public?
Probably his party, I'd suggest at the moment. I know there's a connection with both, but the thing is, Keir Starmer is such an abysmal leader, possibly the worst leader in my lifetime of a political party, that he has that buffer. Because Johnson's really unpopular now, but Keir Starmer is just as unpopular, and he hasn't convinced anyone that he stands for anything. So Johnson has that safety net where the leader of the opposition is not up to the job. So you might argue it's more important for him to keep his party on side, because as long as he keeps them on side, the public's not so important. As soon as the public starts to say, yeah, we'd rather have a Labour, or at least the Liberal Democrats and the Greens or whatever, they all start rising at the expense of the Conservatives. And if it starts looking like there could be a Labour minority coalition with other parties that would wipe out the Tory majority, then his party will start turning on him. But at the moment, he's just really personally unpopular. So all he needs to do is convince his party that, no, I'm going to turn it around or whatever. So I'd probably say it's more important that he's popular with his party, I would suggest.
So he probably needs to. Well, they can't really deal with Rishi Sunak then, can he?
No. I mean, it's embarrassing though, isn't it? If you see that leak that suggests that he literally said out loud to a colleague or colleagues, I was thinking of maybe moving Rishi to health. I think he could do a really good job there. By the way, to anyone listening, that's bullshit. It's not, oh, there's a job opportunity for him there. Literally, Chancellor is the most prestigious job in government. The only better job is Prime Minister. So if you move someone from Chancellor, you are demoting them. And when you demote them, there's only two reasons to demote them. Either you think they're not up to the job, or you don't want them showing you up. I can't think of another reason why you would remove a Chancellor. So, one of those two is generally the reason. Sajid Javid was removed because he felt he wasn't up to the job within the confines of what they were asking, which was do everything Dominic Cummings says. So, and the previous Philip Hammond was removed because he didn't agree with Boris Johnson's agenda. So yeah, it's there's only two reasons why you remove a Chancellor. So yeah, I think ultimately I don't think he can do anything, but he's embarrassed himself because, like I say, he's on record as saying that, and then he's been told that that's really stupid. Don't do that. Like, do you understand like the ramifications if you did that? And presumably he's listened to them. So that makes him look weak as hell. Oh yeah, that monsoon's just arrived here, but outside, and yeah, I can hear the rumbling of the. Oh God, I hope the weather improves by the middle of the week, or at least is relatively dry.
It's just started past here actually, so you're welcome. Sent over your way.
Moved its way just down the road to me. Okay, so we both kind of think that really Johnson's got no room for manoeuvre at the minute with Sunak.
He's stuck between a rock and a hard place there, isn't he?
He is definitely between a rock and a hard place. One thing I'll just say quickly, because I don't have any additional information, but the government continues to lose all kinds of civil lawsuits against the Good Law Project for their dodgy PPE contracts, which everyone should know about, by the way. I know we banged on about this, but basically the government has used our tax money during this pandemic to just hive off contracts to friends of theirs who literally didn't have any experience of providing PPE or medical equipment before. Some of them didn't even own companies until they got a contract, set the company up immediately, and basically just, like Del Boy, just went, oh yeah, I'll order some of these from China. And of course, the worst aspect of it is because most people, even if they don't agree with the cronyism, will say, well, they got the job done, didn't they? You know, let's not make them a meal of it. But they didn't. That's the whole point. They didn't get the job done, and there was no punishment. You know, they got hundreds of. There was that guy recently who got hundreds of £1 million contracts for PPE that he mostly failed with, and he's recently bought himself a mansion. You know, with the proceeds, we've basically, us mugs, the taxpayers, have paid for his mansion. He's fucking laughing all the way to the bank. Anyway, the Good Law Project continues to win cases against the government. Unfortunately, there are only civil lawsuits, which effectively only serve to embarrass the government. They don't actually have any penalty attached to them. So no ministers are going to go to jail or anything like this, unfortunately, sadly. Although there's one particular case, Mike, that's been in the news this week, and it just goes to prove again that this government has no morals whatsoever, and also the system is not built to deal with persistent law breaking from the highest office in the land. So Lord Bethel, who is a who is a junior minister in the health department, we've discussed this before, he's not elected. So we've discussed before that Boris Johnson makes an awful lot of appointments from the House of Lords where you are not an elected MP, which doesn't sound like anything special, but
it's a bit of a grey area, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I have to admit, I said it before, I think Tony Blair did it a couple of times at least, but Boris Johnson has really gone overboard in continually, I mean, an obvious example is Lord Frost. So the buffoon that's undermining the Brexit deal, and even though he signed it, is now saying it's terrible and he wants to renegotiate it. That idiot is not an elected MP. So none of us voted for him. He's just been plucked out of the House of Lords for such an important position as well. And then you've got this junior health minister, Dildo Harding's another example, you know. She's from the House of Lords. She got handed control of test and trace, made a fucking pig's ear of it. But Lord Bethel's another example. He's from the House of Lords, unelected. He was in the health department as a junior minister, and he has been ordered by the courts, or was notified some months ago by the courts, I think September it was said. He was told that he would have to provide his mobile phone so they could examine it for communication related to awarding of contracts for PPE and such. And recently he disclosed that, oh, I'm sorry, my phone's broken. I've had to get a new one. Now, me or you wouldn't get away with doing something so transparently corrupt. If me or you were told, by the way, you're in trouble, boys, going to be an investigation into your activity at work. Word is you're doing a few dodgy deals on the side, like through your private network, so we're going to have to examine your phone. A couple of weeks later, you say, oh, yeah, think about that. I was pissed and dropped my phone in the river, so sorry about that. You wouldn't get away with it. You'd be charged with destroying evidence. And yet these corrupt bastards can just say, sorry, yeah. I mean, that's not even getting into the idea that you shouldn't be able to get away with conducting public government business on your private networks. There is no reason to do that unless you are doing dodgy, crooked things. That's what this is all about. You know, can you give me a good reason as to why you would contact companies and donors and rich people about government contracts on your private WhatsApp or your private texts or emails? Why would you do that?
No, can't think of a good reason.
No, says it all. It says it all. We know why he did it. We know he did it because it was crooked, And we know the reason that his phone was broken was because he knew it was crooked and he didn't want courts uncovering that it was crooked. And yet we're supposed to just shake our heads and go, oh, well, got away with that, didn't he? The problem is...
Didn't this happen before?
I believe it did, yeah. I can't remember off the top of my head. Situation was, we probably did discuss it in a previous show.
I'm sure there's been a situation where evidence was just lost or misplaced.
Yeah, because I think Theresa May, when she was Home Secretary, she lost all kinds of evidence. I think it was on child abuse. I think it was on child abuse investigation. She lost all kinds of evidence. I may be wrong, by the way. That's just a honest engine. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. It was something serious. It may not have been child abuse, so don't hold me to that. But you know,
there was something else as well. There's something else in this government, wasn't there? And to do with the awarding the contracts. Who?
Yeah, you're right. I'm sure you're right. I just can't think of it off the top of my head.
Who's been? Someone else got away with one. I'm sure. I really can't remember details. I wish I could now.
Okay.
But this happened during the pandemic again. Awarding of dodgy contracts. Who was it? Who fucking dodged that bullet?
Oh God. I'm not going to be able to remember, Mike, and it's not an easy thing to... Google is your friend. I'm sure our listeners, viewers can find out, but I'm sure we discussed it in an earlier episode.
Point is, this shit happens, and how is it still allowed to happen? Where for anyone else, it wouldn't.
This is the problem, and this is why people should be pissed off about it. Because as me and Mike have said, if it was you or us, you try getting away with that. If you're called into court, you know, in 3 years' time, because there's such a backlog, because so many courthouses got closed down by the government. But if you eventually were called to court and you were told your phone was to be sweeped for information relating to the case, you try telling them, "Oh, I got a new phone. Dropped the old one in the river, didn't I?" You see if that works. See what the court says about that. See if they just shrug their shoulders and go, "Well, you shouldn't have done that, should you? That was a bit silly, but I guess we'll do without the evidence." You know, so if you know the whole one rule for them, another rule for everyone else, never clear in that situation, and you should be angry about it for that reason. If you can't get away with it, why should they?
Here.
Yeah. So yeah, that was that situation. Lord Bethel. Mike, did you see another disturbing development? By the way, I haven't seen the full information on this, but one thing we should say is I've noted that there's been a few articles recently saying that there's more and more young people being hospitalized because of COVID. Now, I think we always made it clear that there was a chance that could happen, but it seems as if the health service is slightly surprised by the volume of young people actually being hospitalized by COVID. Because, of course, a lot of newspapers particularly, and this government, were making out that it's fine if you're young. As long as you don't have an underlying medical condition, you'll be fine. Just like I said.
I think, well, I've also seen that apparently the kind of any resistance from the youth, if you like, regarding vaccinations, that's kind of decreased apparently as well. Apparently there's less.
I did see that. That's
so
good.
maybe those two things aren't necessarily disassociated with each other.
You could be right. It doesn't take that many people to see like some of their classmates going into hospital thinking, "Oh shit." Sorry, classmate. You know, like college classmates or whatever going into hospital and thinking, "Oh shit, I better take this seriously." Yeah, the club night that I go to, very sadly, there was there was someone from that who it was announced had perished because of COVID. I mean, this was someone, I think, in his late 20s. So it can, it's just not worth taking the chance. I mean, for God's sake, the vaccines are free. Just protect yourself. And there was another big story in the newspaper that I saw, Mike, that caught my attention. So there was this guy, his family wanted this information to be known. This guy, 42 years old.
Yeah, I've seen this, yeah.
Health freak, into bodybuilding. There was a picture of him, looked like a lumberjack. Bodybuilding, he used to climb mountains. I don't know if he did triathlons. Sadly, he didn't seem that humble because he seemed to have bought into the macho bullshit because he'd fallen down the anti-vaxxer rabbit hole, where he thought that because he was so manly and tough and rugged that he didn't need to have a vaccine because he was powerful enough to fight it off. Obviously, you know what I'm going to say. He perished in hospital from COVID. And apparently he did say to some of the staff members when they were putting him on a ventilator that he'd been foolish and he wished he had the vaccine. Now, the last place you want to have a regret is on your deathbed, isn't it, really? So, kiddies, don't fall into the anti-vaxxer rabbit hole. Whatever you think about putting something into you, medical professionals have told you what this is about. This is lowering your risk drastically of being hospitalized. It also lowers your risk of contracting it at all and passing it on to other people. It's good for other people, and it's also good for you to get immunized. Like I say, we've seen young people dying from the disease. We've seen young people getting long COVID that affects them for potentially months and years. And this guy was the epitome of like masculinity and fitness, and it got him. So if that doesn't convince you that it's really not worth rolling the dice on that, I don't know what will. Anything else, Mike, that you think has been big over the last week or so on Plague Island?
I don't think so. I can't think of anything. Well, other than old Dildo deciding she's going to be stepping down from, is it October or something like that? I saw.
Yeah, some small nugget of positive news is that Dildo has finally seen the writing on the wall and has stepped down as the chair of NHS Improvement, which was a joke because she did more than most to overwhelm the NHS with her pitiful attempts at a test and trace app. But at least she's finally bitten the bullet, so to speak, so we don't have to see her hopefully involved in the NHS. I'm sure she gets to retire on a pile of money with her Tory MP hubby, who's also the anti-corruption champion of the government.
Yeah, I'm sure she'll do okay for herself.
I'm sure she'll do absolutely fine. Did you watch the Olympics at all, by the way, Mike? Just on a light-hearted note to end on. Did you watch any of that?
I've seen very fucking little of the Olympics.
No, me neither. But despite my general disdain for a lot of Olympic events and whatever, I do think, if I understand the point of the Olympics, it's very cool to have a particular physical pursuit that you are superior in to everyone else, test the limits of the human body, that kind of thing. And Great Britain managed to finish at the top 5 of nations, which is quite impressive when you consider the nations ahead of us were like the US and China, two of the richest, most populous nations on the planet. And I think we finished ahead of the Russian Olympic Committee, who have replaced Russia because Russia aren't allowed to compete because of their doping. But yeah, we did really well. So, I mean, I guess that's something to be pleased with, even though it doesn't really materially affect any of us. But I guess it's Well, the thing is, if we championed, us finishing runners up in the Euros, we have to say, also fair play to the Olympians for doing that. So maybe gives us a slight pick up in national mood, considering all the other terrible things happening. And yeah, the COVID figures relatively unchanged. I don't think there's been any drastic change either way. They're kind of improving, but not by very much, because we've just effectively removed all restrictions at once. So let's hope we don't create any dangerous variants in the meantime.
Well, fingers crossed, but there was always going to be a case of fingers crossed for that, wasn't it? Although the
Yeah.
other, like Scotland and Wales, they're lifting even more restrictions now, aren't they?
Yeah, so they're following us. So for once, maybe this decision wasn't. The thing is, I never considered it was a bad decision. It was just the timing of it was really stupid to me.
It was risky.
Yeah, why not wait for, more vaccine coverage? But anyway, fingers crossed we won't create. Oh, sorry, one more story actually to finish with, Mike, that I read, just to underline the stupidity of the anti-vax movement. Did you see that there's a bunch of idiots who broke into a building thinking that it was a BBC building to protest
No, what's this?
their coverage of the pandemic, and it turns out that the BBC hasn't been there for years. So
No, what did they do?
yeah, it's one of those stories where you just shake your heads and go, well, if you needed any more evidence of how dumb the anti-vaxxers are, there you go. Yeah, it was a group of an anti-vax protest group broke into a building that used to be housing some part of the BBC, but they haven't been there for a while now, so they broke into the wrong building. And as somebody brilliantly noted, maybe they should do better research, as they are so fond of telling other people to do. And the other thing, sorry, there's also another funny story about anti-vaxxers. You're aware, aren't you, of Piers Corbyn, who is the embarrassing brother of Jeremy, who has nothing to do with his brother. But Piers Corbyn has been this like big champion in the anti-vax movement. He turns up to protests, like making all manner of stupid claims about, pandemic and crap like this. He was pranked by these two guys. I mean, the two guys seem like insufferable posh middle class wankers, but they did quite well because they managed to con him into believing on a march of some kind. They conned him into believing they were representatives from AstraZeneca, and they offered him a bribe to stop like talking the vaccines down, and he apparently accepted it even though it was fake. So another example to anyone who genuinely thinks that these people have any kind of insight into a plan that none of us can see. They're all fucking charlatans. They're lying to you. They're bullshit artists. Piers Corbyn, literally, the one thing these people have that they keep saying is they can see through the establishment lies, and their principles drive them to tell people about this secret that vaccines or whatever. I'm careful how I word things in case the algorithm picks up and says you're spreading medical misinformation again. But basically, this guy, he's built his career. Most of us think he's a weirdo crank, but he's built his authenticity on supporting these anti-vax nut jobs and saying, yes, we're the only people who can see the truth. And he's been bought off with a fake bribe. 10 grand is all it takes him to pretend that he apparently does support vaccines. So that should tell you that this guy is a clown and he doesn't know what he's talking about. So please, people, I mean, we have presented copious evidence just from those hilarious stories that anti-vaxxers don't have a fucking clue. They're Dunning-Kruger, people. So please, just follow proper medical facts that are in reputable newspapers than these idiots who claim that they see the truth through all the lies and that they can see the plan unfolding. Anything to end on, Mike?
Don't be silly, wrap your willy.
Well, that's particularly pertinent coming from Mr. Michael Large himself, who's we've been a little bit anti-condom. So
No.
if you get
Um,
me.
No, not at all. What are you talking
Yeah,
about?
Mike's completely anti-protection, and here he is saying he's seen the light, you know. So you know that shit is authentic.
100%.
But
No,
hey,
go on. What are you saying?
no, I was going to say, but hey, people,
Behave.
I mean, yeah, we've got a bit of miserable viewing figures at the moment. So come on, help us out here. Share with a friend, click a like, give us some love,
Yeah.
because we can't continue this indefinitely. If you don't like what we're saying and you're not watching, then we're going to disappear, aren't we? So come on, share the love and let people know why Lockdown Large is the place to be. Over to Mike.
Yeah, hit the little bell as well if you've subscribed. Don't forget to subscribe. Hit the little bell. It'll let you know when we post some new shit. Most of you obviously will know now, kind of roughly when something's going to land. But still, hit that bell, and it should send you a handy little notification that'll take you straight to it. Yeah, and share alike. Sharing's caring, people. So don't just share your crabs. Share
Your jabs.
your jabs and Lockdown Large as well. So yeah, share it with your friends, your family, and interact and all that sort of good stuff that we usually ramble on about. Make sure you do.
Yeah, it makes sense. So take care of each other, people. And until next time, this has been Lockdown Large saying, get yourself penetrated.